Okay, so today we're going to talk about the rise of AI agents. Everybody's talking that that's the next trend, and we have such amazing panelists with us. So first off, Rak Garg, he's a partner at Bain Capital Ventures. Do you want to tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, happy to. Bain is a $15 billion firm in Silicon Valley and SF. We invest out of a $2 billion firm. I've been a partner there for about 5 years. I spend most of my time in converting IT services to software, cybersecurity, and then what I call cracked hardos in SF, which is more of a demographic than a domain, but works anyway. Before investing, I was the head of product for security at Atlassian, and so that was sort of my operating career. I was there for about 3 years. I tried to start a company afterwards. It was a total failure. Unlike my friend Praveen, whose story comes from success, mine comes from failure. And so I decided to start investing because Bain was on the board at Atlassian, and it's been a great journey. I work with companies like Profit Security, Nebuloc Agents, Decagon, Crea, Contextual, and a few others.
Awesome. Yeah, and Praveen, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the panel. Managing Director at Insight Partners. I'm an operator turned investor. We were just kind of sharing some notes here. So, I think it's been an interesting journey in terms of being able to kind of work in a big company, do a startup, and then move to the investing side. I primarily focus on deep tech, automation, and the dev ecosystem. Some of my companies are like Postman, LaunchDarkly, Crew AI, Delve, et cetera. Look forward to the conversation.
I've been asked by the photographer to move, so I'll move here. Okay. Very cool. All right. So who here knows what AI agents are? Okay. So maybe my first question to you is explaining what are AI agent and what really makes a true AI agent? Is it like memory? Is it reasoning? Is it adaptability? Or is it something else? Would love to hear from you. How do you define AI agents?
I think of an agent as just a model that acts on external tools, external systems, and acts in a recursive loop with some amount of judgment, right? And then there's many apps that can take this form. I think the key distinction is it has to call out to other systems and do work in those systems, which is what a human does. Like if you think about why we haven't been able to automate things with APIs for the last 20 years, it's because of the disparity of calling and making requests to all of these different systems that talk in different ways. I think the second thing is they have to act with some amount of judgment, right? And so they need to be able to make somewhat correct decisions fairly often, just like a human would. And I think literally the way that you measure an agent is for the length of task that it is able to do both of those things in. And so today I think that length is about 7 minutes. People argue that once we get to something like 10 to 15, it'll surpass what a human worker can do without errors. This might be true in BPOs and other sort of lower skilled industries, but that's how I think about agents.
Yeah, no, that's a pretty good comprehensive description. I sort of came to AI agents from sort of the previous generation of automation, right? It used to be called RPA. We have some pretty meaningful companies in that space. UiPath is a public company, Automation Anywhere and such like. So, the problem statement really is sort of, can you take a complex business workflow and be able to automate it in a consistent and scalable way? I think to a large extent, RPA accomplished that for static manual workflows, but it fundamentally failed where you had more dynamicity or where you had more sort of complex workflows. So I think my way of looking at AI agent, I think foundationally agreeing with the way Rak sort of described it, is to really be able to build a consistent workflow automation that can, given the context and given the business logic, is able to execute that workflow and be dynamic enough to be able to adapt to the user or to the sort of business environment. I think the big challenge that we've always had is how do you deal with new data models or new use cases within the context of an automation without having to go back and redo the whole thing, right? So I think the promise of AI agents is that they would add that dynamicity, that contextual awareness, right, to these very high value business workflows, which today either require a human to build to write a JavaScript or some kind of brittle automation. So maybe a longer way of defining it, but that's the way I think about it.
And that's a great definition. Basically, kind of an AI agent is your EA online that just does tasks for you. And it's very interesting to know that if we get to a point where we're surpassing 10 minutes, then all of our jobs are lost, basically. Cool. So who here is building AI-like products? So that's the thing is like as investors, we all like AI agents are the new hyped trend. So as investors, we probably get tons of companies coming to us and say, hey, we're AI agents or we're agentic. But according to you, what really makes a company like agentic? What does it make that, okay, their product is agentic, they're not just an AI company? How do you tell like what will work and what won't?
Those are two very different questions. What makes a company agentic? I think it's really, can you give it a set of tasks, walk away, and come back, and the tasks are done? There's a company called Cognition that many of you are familiar with. If you speak to CTOs that use Cognition, they have altered the way that their developers work to make Cognition work, right? So for 4:30, a developer will write a set of prompts for Cognition to do while they're at home or while they're sleeping. And then they come back in the morning and they find that some of the work's been done correctly, which is great. Maybe some of the work hasn't. It's fine. We'll get better at that over time. But that's what I think makes an agentic app, that you can be away from the keyboard, not have to worry about guiding the thing over and over again. At that point, you're better off prompting, and it'll actually just do the things for you. How do you figure out what's real? I have no idea. As an early stage investor at the seed and A, I'm very founder driven. It's really two questions. Does this person seem like a very high agency, no pun intended, high agency, dynamic, aggressive commercial person that is going to go and win commercial deals? And then two, is this a market that's worth investing in? And those are kind of the two questions at seed and A that we ask.
Yeah, from my perspective, I think, for it to be agentic, and it's got to be able to, I'll come back to this notion of dynamicism, right? Because that really, for me, is the critical problem we're trying to solve. Because inherently, automation of tasks is complex. Now, obviously, there's a spectrum. Like if for a consumer, today, most of us automate our tasks, using some form of automation tool. We are constantly in the loop, so we accept a certain level of accuracy when an agent executes a certain task, right? In the business context, if you go back to sort of what Rak said, right, in terms of being able to give it the task and walk away, to be able to accomplish that, you need to be able to have the ability to understand the context, and dynamically adapt. Do I need to access a certain type of data? Do I need to access a certain type of tool? Do I need to run a certain type of code? Do I need to write code, right, to execute a particular workflow? I think agentic for me is the ability for that piece of automation to understand the context and then be able to come up with a plan and figure out what it needs to do and change the plan, right, if there is a new prompt from the user or it's a new set of circumstances that it needs to deal with. I'll kind of give you like a bit of a hot take. I don't think there's a lot of agents today that truly meet that definition of autonomous, execution, right? Today, for agents to work, you need a couple of things, right? You need a forward deployed engineer because you need to basically be able to first give the agent the appropriate context. Some amount of work is required from a human to be able to understand the operating context and be able to kind of give it the integrations of the data, whatever, right? You need human in the loop to be able to kind of continually adapt, continually like improve the model, right? You obviously need to build evals, but there's today successful agents have a human in the loop or the ability to kick it up to a human in the loop, right? The third piece is today, most agents, most models are non-deterministic. So, you have to factor that in. So there's certain workflows where you're okay with 90% accuracy, right? There's certain workflows where you need to have 100% accuracy, right? So in that case, perhaps human in the loop is the way to solve it. So the way agents are deployed today, effectively reflect the fact that they are not quite at the stage of this ideal definition, right, of being autonomous. Maybe in a 10-minute horizon, but if you truly want the promise of AI agents is that, you can just walk away and it can do your job for you, right? An FP&A workflow, for example, in a complex enterprise.
Yeah, I think we're very close to unlocking it, actually. But I want to shift a little bit. Who here is raising funding soon? Okay, so we have two amazing VCs here. So tell us, before, I remember like a few years ago, you only had to add like .ai to your company to make it AI, right? But now everybody has AI. Like, what do you look for when you're investing in a founder? Like, how can they get your attention and how can they get to a point where they get investments?
Well, look, I think at the early stage, there's a few things that have changed, right? Like, we used to index very heavily on founder market fit. It used to be sort of, well, what have you done before? Is it the same as what you're doing now? Do you have access to this kind of customer? If I think about our best AI investments, none of those things have been true. The things that have been the most true are, these founders tend to be much younger. They tend to hustle much harder. A lot of the industries have gotten more observable from the outside, right? Like, you now have 19-year-olds that drop out to do dental RCM roll-ups. I didn't know what any of those words meant when I was 19. And so the thing is that, you have to index on hustle. There's ways to look for hustle. When we meet someone, we ask, what progress have you made over the last whatever quota of time, right? I think in the best cases, I've seen companies go from 0 to $1 million in ARR in 4 to 6 weeks. I think in developer tools, it's sort of an order of magnitude higher. You have, Cursor, Bolt, Lovable. These companies went from 0 to 100 million in a matter of several weeks. And so there's that. I think the other element of it is, how much is this founder AI native? Like, can they really work with these models in a way that lends itself to best performance? There's ways to look for that too. What is the eval set? How are you comparing the prompt responses from one iteration to the next? How do you hold those metrics constant when you change other things? Because these models are non-deterministic. And so product building as a craft, I think, is changing quite a bit. And whatever worked for the last generation of companies, those product people will not be able to succeed doing the exact same things today with these models.
Yeah, that's awesome feedback. So basically, hustle and tech.
Yeah.
Nice. That's what I also look for when I'm hiring or working with partners is like, can they hustle? Can they figure out things on their own and can they execute? I think, you're spot on. So Praveen, you've also worked as an operator. So my question to you, for enterprises, what are they looking for when evaluating like new AI solutions and how can founders kind of gain their trust or big enterprise companies?
Yeah, I got great news for everybody. Every enterprise right now is cutting spend everywhere else to be able to invest in AI, right? And it's not great news for us who have like all these SaaS companies that are selling to these enterprises, but it's actually quite amazing the cycle that we're in because there is this massive, everybody's bought into this massive promise of AI from a productivity perspective, right? So IT budgets are growing at whatever it is, 1 or 2%. The allocation of AI is essentially coming out of carve-outs from spend in other areas. So you almost have this sort of imperative right now, if you're a SaaS company, that you better be agentic or you would die, right? But to answer your question specifically, I think enterprises are leaning into AI way more aggressively than any other technology that I've seen. I mean, we've seen sort of the adoption of cloud, and it took forever, and even now I think 40% of workloads are still on-prem, right? You looked at every other sort of major technology transition. It took a while, but AI, it's almost feels like because we viscerally feel it as consumers, right? The ChatGPT moment for all of us essentially made us all believers, right? And that's true of every CIO and every IT leader out there. Having said that, I think there's been like a slew of articles that just came out over the past couple of weeks, which kind of talk about, and the MIT put something out, which basically said, it's this trough of disillusionment around deployment of AI in the enterprise, primarily because of what we were just talking about a little bit earlier, right? The expectation is that AI is going to do all these things autonomously for you. The reality is that it needs, forward deployed engineers to kind of shoehorn the solution and make it work, right? It needs human in the loop. It needs good evals, right? All the things that Rak was talking about in terms of what makes for a good AI agent. So a lot of times I think there's a big mismatch between the expectation of what AI can do and where AI agentic maturity is. So I do believe that we're going to get there, right? Because I think, as you can see, I mean, on a weekly basis, we have like models improving leaps and bounds. 2 years ago, we didn't have tool use, we didn't have browser use, right? We didn't have MCP, like a lot of these things we take for granted today. And so, 6 months from now, I think we're going to have fundamentally a different set of operating principles that we can build AI solutions on, right? So I think enterprises today are open to experimenting, and that's phenomenal news. I think both of us are investors in companies where we do have these 19, 20-year-olds selling to CIOs, and CIO willing to write that check, right, to buy a compliance product, right, or to buy an insurance product from these founders, primarily because they want to be able to experiment and be able to sort of understand how AI can help. Now, I would also say that the flip side of this is everybody has a runway. It's a 1-year ARR contract, hopefully, right? So there is a little bit of a prove it time frame here that we should all be conscious about, right? Ultimately, you will pay for value, as all of us do. And so setting expectations and being able to sort of deliver on those are key.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So talking about enterprises, now there's so many AI agents company going out there. Now enterprises need to connect to all these systems. So I know you invest a lot in cybersecurity, and you have a lot of experience with it. What are the biggest security risks you're seeing enterprise have in connecting with those systems?
A lot of people want to think about agents like employees, but the thing is that you can't, because agents aren't afraid of being fired, and agents don't have bills to pay. And agents don't have an internal compass of should I do this thing or not do that thing. And so I think agent access and authorization have just been really hard problems to solve. I mean, I think at most you can give an agent a set of tools and a set of scopes that say you can make this set of API calls. But within that set of API calls, things can just totally go wrong. I think the canonical example is, think of a sales agent, right? You tell it to go email your highest prospect accounts from the last quarter and just keep them warm. It'll find that one of the prospects is, I don't know, let's just say it's Cisco, and there's a guy at Jeff who's on the account at Cisco. What if it makes the email wrong? What if it pings the wrong Jeff at Cisco? There's at least 500 of them, right? And so how do you think about what it actually can and can't do, and then what it should or shouldn't do? The can or can't is the easier problem. The should or shouldn't, the judgment that comes at the time of call, I think is a really hard problem to solve. There aren't really any security products that have done a great job of solving that yet, but I think it's an unsolved problem.
That's a good, if you're looking at a new startup to build, that could be a really cool use case, is more security for AI agents. So AI agents right now, they can do, they're not there yet where we can they can do more than 7 minutes of work, but we're getting close to there. So Praveen, I wanted to ask you, what are some use cases that are being used with AI agent in enterprises? What are they using AI agents for right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think you almost have a spectrum, right, of these agents. One end of the spectrum, obviously, not in the enterprise, it's consumer. There was a slew of these agents early in the year, like Deep Research, Operator, that came out from the large labs that help us as consumers sort of get some of these analyst type of workflows done. I think in the enterprise, broadly speaking, there are a couple of buckets, right? I'd say there's sort of each enterprise has its own unique set of workflows, right? Each company, depending on the vertical they're in, may have a different set of workflows. Could be a compliance workflow, could be an FP&A workflow, accounting workflow, insurance workflow, and such like. So you have a set of companies that are building these horizontal platforms to build these sort of next generation of workflow automation, if you will. So you can think of open source frameworks like Crew or LangChain, right? Or you can think of more sort of proprietary platforms like a Workato, or even the RPA guys trying to come down into the space. The idea there is you have the ability to bottoms up, kind of using building blocks, build your own custom workflow. Bring your models, bring your memory, right? Bring your static code, or even kind of code writing models. Put that together into a particular workflow, so you can solve something that's very unique to that particular company. These are like horizontal agentic companies. So you're seeing some of these companies getting traction, because I think enterprises want to evolve away from BPOs, right, and be able to build their own workflow automation using AI. The second category, I think, is more sort of these verticalized AI agents. So there you could be like functional agents, so like sales agents, legal, marketing, such like, right? Or pure vertical agents, like an agent for insurance workflows, or an agent for finance workflows, or compliance workflows, and such like. So you're starting to see some early traction. I think there was a lot of investment going into sales agents, for example. It's obviously a big use case. And I think they're sort of going through their own little maturity cycle, right, in terms of their performance. Again, the big challenge is really about expectation matching of, end users are trying to understand what these agents can do and what the agents can actually deliver, independent of what you see on the billboards, right? The experience in the customer environment actually matters. Some vertical agents are actually, look, our hypothesis, for example, in terms of the way we invest is we look for like really dense workflows, in enterprises, where there's like, for example, we invest in a compliance company, right? And so compliance is like a lot of paperwork, like, you have like GDPR has its own set of things you need to do, SOC 2, like must have for every company to be able to kind of sell into an enterprise. So, but it's very, lots of coordination, lots of document ingestion and such like use cases where AI is actually well suited, right? Because it can kind of ingest all this data and be able to give you, the sort of the gist of it. But again, AI agents need to have the appropriate architectural scaffolding. If not, they don't work. But we're seeing, so that's broadly horizontal platforms, vertical AI agents, in some areas functional agents, right? That's where we're seeing traction. Still early days though.
Yeah, it's still early, but I'm sure this AI agent product are going to explode in the next few months. So it's like an exciting time. So Rak, talking about like exciting startups, tell us a little bit about a startup that you recently invested in that's also agentic.
I'm proud of a lot of the portfolio, but I have to say that one of the companies that's done really interesting work is a company called Echelon. And, the idea is you've got all of these big service and system integrators and services companies like Deloitte and Accenture and so on. In many cases, they make 6 to 7 times the amount of revenue that an actual vendor would, right? So when I was at Atlassian, we would go sell to some of the biggest companies in the world. If I was making $100 of Jira Confluence license revenue, one of our partners, the consulting firm, would take home $500 to $700 for that same license. And the reason is because they're providing a lot more expertise, right? Like they come to you and they say, based on everything we know about your company, your industry, your competitors, here's how you should set up this really big, really heavy enterprise product. You can automate a lot of that today, like a lot of it. You probably can't automate the human touch, the actual like deal winning, the trust, but you can automate a lot of the work to be done. Echelon is choosing the ServiceNow ecosystem, very similar dynamics all over the world. They're going after these big sort of global system integrators, and they're saying, you can either use us, or you can partner with us, or you can, keep doing the advice thing, just don't do the implementation thing. And the system integrators have a very, very baked-in incentive to work with this type of agent, because that's the worst part of their business. They would love to be 80% margin companies. They would love to just do the deal making and not do the other parts of it. And so we've been going and incubating a lot of companies like that company.
Okay, so now this is my favorite question. And then we're going to maybe talk for another few minutes, and then I want to open it up for your questions as well. All right, so everybody is talking about AGI. Even Sam Altman said that they already figured out AGI, which is kind of scary. So some people say that actually the natural path to AGI is agents. So do you see today agent being the first step to AGI? What are your thoughts?
Wow, I get the AGI question.
Well, both of you gets the AGI question.
Now, I think, look, again, this is sort of the the art of the possible, right? I mean, AGI hypothetically is supposed to kind of, liberate us from the mundane and make our lives more meaningful and enriching. I think, look, agentic, if you go back to the definition that, Rak mentioned, right, which is being able to understand the context, right, understand the logic of what needs to get done, and be able to sort of dynamically use resources to get that work done, effectively is the way you would stitch together how you do work. Like, that's the way we do work as humans, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I think if we're able to sort of build consistently scalable agentic architectures, those could be the paths to AGI. However, I think, there's a lot more going on there, right? I mean, agentic is like a methodology. It really depends on the underlying model. I mean, today, fundamentally, all large language models are non-deterministic. Yes, you're converging, right, towards better and better models, primarily because you're forcing them to think longer, or, you have some kind of like model, in a model of experts sort of architecture. So there's a lot of innovation that's happening in terms of how you route the particular task through a model, but inherently large language models are non-deterministic. And so there's this whole sort of, I guess, group of scientists who basically say, large language models are not the way we're going to get to AGI, right? Perhaps you need a better world model. So I think the point I'm trying to make is, yes, agentic way of executing workflows is a critical aspect of how you emulate human work, but there are some foundational aspects of what it's going to take for us to get to this sort of benchmark, whatever AGI means, right? That are still sort of work in progress, I would say.
What about you, Rak? Is there anything to add to that?
I kind of feel like the whole AGI thing is a red herring. It almost doesn't matter, right? Like, I think the thing is that if you look at the jobs to be done in the world, none of them really require like a fully sort of general intelligence that can make decisions on all aspects of different parts of the world. I think most of our jobs want us to be very specialized in the things that we do. And so, I think the general models in the state that they're in today can do a lot of those jobs. I think a lot of it is prompt scaffolding, and you have to do the evals right. There's a lot you have to get right. But there are a lot of tasks, a lot of things that people don't want to be doing that these models can now do. A really good example is text extraction from documents. Like, OCR has been a market for 40 years, and it's still done by BPOs. And so all you have to do is get the cost per page down and the level of fidelity high enough where if you look at a table, a VLM at this point, any open source VLM, will now give you what's in that table as a JSON blurb. That, believe it or not, is a $600 billion market. Right? And you don't even need a vendor anymore. You can just host a VLM on your laptop and do it. And so I don't actually think the AGI thing matters in the near term. The thing I think about is what can you unlock if you do have AGI? I kind of think about that as sort of high-level decisions, executive decision support, strategy, sort of like these big questions. Like if Uber asks, should I ever try to go win China again? Like that kind of question, you probably need an AGI to handle for you. But if you broke it up into like a million smaller questions, I actually think the models we have today could still accelerate you to answering that question. So that's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, we're still early. All right, so let's pretend we're in 2030 now. All right, I want you to predict a little bit the future. How do you think we're going to be interacting with AI agents, and what do you think they're going to be used for?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's again, if you kind of break down what an AI agent really is. Hopefully we will have, the ability to really understand the task, right? That's the fundamental aspect of an AI agent that we have to continue to progressively get better, is the reasoning ability. The whole reason why we even have AI agents today is because we have the ability to reason on what the task is. And today, that model takes a lot of training. Like, you have to kind of ground it in the particular task for it to be able to break down a particular prompt properly. So will models get smart enough that you don't have to do that level of training to be able to do reasoning properly. Maybe that's one way to do it. I do think that most agents will write code to get tasks done. I think code gen certainly is, advancing much more rapidly, and I think we will get to better and better and more accurate code writing. So a lot of today, what is static will probably be more dynamic because agents will write dynamic code, right? I think the third piece of this is, there's an aspect of input today that's completely missing. Most of our input into agents today is text. So I think the multimodal aspect of interacting with AI agents will probably, hopefully, be at a point where we just take it for granted. Today, most interactions still text-based. You're passing it, either like a prompt or code or what have you, right? And I think I couldn't agree with Rak more. There's like tons and tons of mundane tasks today that still require a lot of human intervention. Today's AI agents do not work reliably without human intervention. So to the extent that we can subsume some of that, I think that'll be a great advancement that we can see. And the last piece will be security. I think it's an unsolved problem today. We don't know what we don't know, in terms of what's going on with our data and how these kind of workflows happen. People working on it, obviously, a few startups out there that have interesting ideas. But because AI agents themselves are sort of in this early stage, I think security needs to evolve as it goes along.
So basically, they will be able to operate without a human in the loop, which is exciting. What about you, Rak? Do you have a different prediction, or?
No, I mean, I think Praveen is absolutely right. Maybe I'll take a bit of a more macro lens. I think a lot about what it means for the future of software, like all of our industries, if the cost of producing it goes to zero, right? So like, if you could just service a use case without buying Asana, Dropbox, Jira, or whatever, why wouldn't you? Historically, the answer has been because you don't want to maintain it. It's really time intensive. You have other things to do as a company. Building software is not your core competency. But all those things are going away, right? Like now it takes one person to build an app, not a team of. Now it takes way less money to build an app, not years and millions of dollars. And so there are some apps that are immune. Anything with a network effect, this doesn't really apply because the network is why you use the app in the first place, since you want to join the network. But for a lot of these kind of like single use case productivity type tools that characterized a lot of value creation in the preceding 15 years, I mean, the next best option just got way cheaper, way faster. And so I think at best, it creates price pressure, which means that these vendors will no longer be able to sell huge deals that have sustained all these market caps. I think at worst, it means that the vendors go away in the long run, or they just become kind of databases because they're systems of record and you interact with them in different ways, but you're not willing to pay a premium for that database because it's your own data. So that's one thing. I think the second thing I think about is what does that mean for us, like as VCs? Because the reason that we give or invest, between $5 and $500 million in these companies is because we feel like they can be gigantic companies. But if they can no longer be gigantic companies because they're getting outcompeted by bespoke solutions, then do you end up in a world where you have millions of micro companies? And is that a good world? I think it's probably a really good world, right? Instead of just like a set of vendors that dominate. And if that's the case, then do you end up with millions of micro VCs? Do you even need VCs? Do people just self-fund? Like these are some of the things that I've been thinking about.
Awesome. All right. Yes, open up for questions.
I didn't know you were starting.
Yeah, what is your question? I'll just repeat it.
The last point we made, right? That how does an enterprise work with a million small companies? Because they want a lot more enterprise comfort for the long term.
Yeah, so how do enterprise companies work with multiple sub-companies if everybody does different AI agents, basically?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think SOC 2 Type 2 will evolve considerably, right? Like, I think that procurement teams in general are going to do their jobs very differently. Procurement agents are now doing a lot of the vetting that a lot of those teams would have done. So like third-party risk is a big category, right? Security scorecard is kind of like the company. Historically, it's all been manual effort. Dropbox says they do password policies for employees. Do they really do them? You have to go validate it. All that work is being done by agents now. And so if vetting was the problem, I think agents will just vet, and then the scale problem isn't really a thing. If it's managing those tools, I don't know. Like maybe we do get AGI, and then those tools can manage other tools. Certainly, there are a bunch of people who believe in multi-agent systems and agent collaboration. I think we're a ways off, but I don't think it's unsolvable. I think the procurement apparatus will change.
Awesome. All right, one more question.
Just going off the the thing that you just said. So it seems like AI has been really good for end users and consumers, right? But the tools that are basically being used out here, the margins on these tools are really low. So I'm wondering, like, who's really making money in AI right now?
We talked about margins before. Why don't you take this one?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think every technology cycle, right, kind of goes through this negative margin curve, right? If you kind of go back a few years, think about sort of all the gig economy companies, the DoorDashes, the Ubers, right, losing gobs and gobs and gobs of money. Ultimately, they found the business model. I mean, for Uber, it was Uber Eats and Uber deliveries, et cetera, right? And so I think the point is that every new technology cycle, it's the reason why I think we as venture capitalists invest, or exist, if you will, is so we can underwrite some of these technology adoption curves. So you're right. I mean, today the economics are upside down. I mean, it's fairly kind of widely published, right, in terms of some of the most popular category of AI tools today are losing tons of money. I'm not talking about models. But I think the idea is like we're trying to understand what does the adoption cycle look like, right? What are customers willing to pay for? What's that value frontier, if you will, where you can continue to increase prices and go. I mean, you think about sort of even SaaS. This whole notion of paying per use was dramatically radical. It took a decade or so for us to be able to perfect the SaaS model, right, and be able to sort of for CFOs to say, okay, now I understand how to budget and pay for SaaS. So is it going to be purely outcome based, right? That's one sort of way that we if we kind of think about units of work as the way to measure AI value, then there's a clear sort of understanding of what that means. I mean, today, take a look at OpenAI's pricing, right? They have a $20 consumer tier. They have a $200 sort of pro tier. They have a $2,000 enterprise tier, right? Where they are hypothetically giving you more and more value as they approach more, long horizon tasks, right? From 10 minutes to, an hour or, maybe a day, that is more valuable. And so maybe we as end users then perceive that value and able to pay for it sufficiently. So I think we're sort of in the exploratory phase. It's not atypical, right, for new technologies to go through this. And it's a bit hair-raising for us, as investors to be able to underwrite that journey. But I do think that, we will find that optimization point.
Awesome. All right. We have 15 seconds, so maybe very quickly answering the question. What is...
So this morning, the opening session said that, VCs are investing in vertical solutions, vertical agents. But if you look at enterprises, and Praveen, I think you mentioned about horizontal agents, the data belongs to the enterprise. What do you look for if you invest in that sector? What's the moat?
So maybe in 30 seconds or less.
Horizontal agents are just really tough, man. I don't know what to say. Glean has done a tremendous job, but I think Glean's going to face really heavy competition. Microsoft's putting enterprise search into E5. Both Anthropic and OpenAI have built out native integrations with all the apps that we would care about that all do enterprise search. So to the moat question, in horizontal agents, I think the moat is who has distribution and who has a captive audience. And then I think for vertical agents, there are no moats. It's sort of like anyone can build anything. And so how far can you get? How fast can you get there? Can you build up enough of a brand and build affinity that way? I think that's what it is. I think at best, maybe you create a data asset. Like maybe you create some kind of library that the enterprise can't live without because you know all of the preferences. It's going to take a long time to get there, though, as a company. So seed and A, I don't think there's moats.
All right, that's it for us. Thank you so much for both of you. That was so insightful. And thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you, Mariane, Rak, and Praveen. Yes.